This week on What in the World is Going On, United Nations Human Rights Council approves 4 anti-Israel resolutions and calls for limited arms embargo. That's right, friends. The UN's at it again. Stay tuned. The Jerusalem Post reported that last week, informing us that the United Nations Human Rights Council approved 4 anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian resolutions, including a call for limited arms embargo against the Jewish state as it wrapped up its 49th session. Israel was the only country the United Nations Human Rights Council censored multiple times. Russia, which is a unhrc member, was censored only once for its invasion of Ukraine. Other countries, North Korea, Iran, Belarus, Myanmar, Nicaragua, and Syria were taken to task for human rights abuses with only one resolution per country. Now, friends, if you're shocked by this anti-Israel bias, well, don't be. Disgusted, yes, but not shocked, because this isn't the first time the UN has singled out Israel for human rights abuses. On the contrary, the United Nations Human Rights Council member states have continued to disproportionately single out Israel year after year. And speaking on this was Ambassador Miriam Ilan Shahar, where she said that, quote, "The problem with this echo chamber is that no reality comes in, but certainly the hatred seeps out." The Jerusalem Post further went on to report that out of the 4 resolution texts, the accountability resolution, which spoke of the arms embargo, is considered to be the most contentious. It urged all states to refrain from transferring arms when they assess that there is a clear risk that such arms might be used to commit or facilitate serious violations or abuses of international human rights law or serious violations of international humanitarian law. And friends, to further demonize Israel, the other 3 resolutions were voted on under what is called Agenda 7, which requires debate about Israel's alleged human rights violations. And as the Jerusalem Post informed us, that no such requirement is leveled against any other of the UN's 193 member states. No, only against Israel. And in these resolutions, they condemned Israeli settlement activity and called for, again, a boycott of settlement products and an Israeli withdrawal to pre-1967 borders. They also called for a right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. And lastly, they called for a withdrawal from Israel, on Israel's part, from the Golan Heights. Now, friends, we've covered these subjects that these resolutions are targeting, so I'm not going to repeat any of that here today. But I will put a couple links of these former newscasts that we have done covering these topics. And so just search for them in the description below, and you can rewatch them and help educate yourself on the situation. Because, friends, it's important to know, it's important to understand and how to answer those who continually single out Israel and demonize her as the aggressor, which couldn't be further from the truth. And while the majority of these nations that voted along with these anti-Israel resolutions continue to single out the only democratic free country in the Middle East, I'm reminded, friends, once again of God's word and of Balaam's prophecy in Numbers chapter 23, verse 9, that the God of Israel put in his mouth. And this is what Balaam said, that Israel would not be reckoned among the nations. And so what we are seeing happening today really comes as no surprise to students of God's word, for we're told that these things will be as Satan continues to have an X marked on the Jewish people's back. And another thing to note is that, friends, that you'll know and you'll understand from reading the Bible is that one day in the millennial kingdom, when Israel's Messiah returns and the preeminence shifts from the Gentiles to the Jewish people, the mantra is not going to be, as the Palestinians say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, but rather from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, Israel will be. And with that, friends, and until next time, this has been What in the World is Going On with the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry. Have a great night, everyone.